President Franklin Roosevelt declared that December 7, 1941 would be a date which would live in infamy after the surprise attack on a U.S. military base at Pearl Harbor. The United States entered World War II the next day. When the Sabina Historical Society realized that our annual meeting would fall on December 7th, we thought it would be fitting for our program for the night to remember local veterans and families involved in World War II and discuss how lives were forever changed. All across the United States, residents of small communities such as Sabina changed the course of their lives to help win the war. Men and women left their homes to work in war plants. Those who stayed behind held scrap drives to collect iron, tin, rubber, and other products that could be recycled into war material. Even the insides of the milkweed pod were collected to use as fill for life jackets during the war. In the summer of 1942, the first Victory Parade was held in Sabina for the purpose of encouraging the residents to get behind the war effort and to urge them to buy war bonds and stamps. During World War II, every American was issued a series of ration books containing removable stamps good for certain rationed items. The rationed items included sugar, meat, cooking oil, and canned goods. A person could not buy a rationed item without also giving the grocer the right ration stamp. Later, ration stamps for shoes and gasoline were issued. The photo seen here is of ration books on display at the Sabina Historical Museum. Many more World War II artifacts can also be seen inside our museum, including military uniforms. These uniforms belong to Gerald Yarger, Hank Sanderson, and Dr. Paul Bernard. By the summer of 1942, a Men in Service sign had been placed in front of the old Opera House, now the Municipal Building, listing 79 names of men and women from the Sabina area who were currently serving in the armed forces. As the draft and enlistment took more men into the military, the names increased rapidly, making it necessary to expand the size of the board, which would be called the Sabina and Community Honor Roll Board. The Honor Roll Board was constructed with volunteer help and was financed by contributions from the community. Working in the H. Griffith Garage, George Tayo and Darrell Brakefield built a frame 27 feet long and 8 feet high. The frame was then covered with sheet metal cut by Everett Talmadge. 2 coverings of vinegar prepared the sheet metal for painting, followed by 3 coats of lead and oil. 20 men volunteered to carry the board to its place, where it fit perfectly to the front of the building. On each side of the board were glass-covered cabinets 7 feet high and 16 inches wide, where pictures of servicemen and women were displayed. Also, at the bottom of the board was a glass-covered case for additional pictures. Above that case was printed, "God, Humanity, Country." Sabina artist Emmett Haynes printed the names, which by then numbered 318. At night, 4 floodlights illuminated the list of names and the large American flag flying above the board. The townspeople came and went, stopping to read the names as the list grew with each passing month. The Sabina Historical Society's first elected president, Joy Dunn Shoemaker, helped organize a notebook in commemoration of the 50-year anniversary of the ending of World War II. This album was compiled and dedicated to all the men and women of the Sabina area who served in the war. Joy recorded that there were 470 citizens from the Sabina community who became a part of the armed services during World War II. She stated that these men and women should not be forgotten, for their sacrifices were many. The notebook contains military photos and information provided by families. It is currently kept in the genealogy room at the Sabina Public Library. These are the photos that were used during our program for the evening. During our program, family members were invited to come forward and share personal stories about these local World War II veterans. The Sabina Historical Society didn't capture any live video or audio during this time. These are photos that were taken during the talks. Any written stories that were submitted to the Sabina Historical Society have been added to notebooks at our museum and the Sabina Public Library. The newspaper clipping seen here, showing 3 sons from the Wilson family who served during World War II, generated some discussion during our program about it being very common for multiple family members to be serving at the same time during this war. There were 4 Vineyard brothers from Sabina who served in the Army. In her book, Sabina Remembered, written by Joy Dunn Shoemaker, she writes a story about each one of the Reese brothers from Sabina who also served in World War II. Germany operated around 1,000 prisoner of war camps during World War II. Virgil Ford and Donald Huffman were 2 veterans from the Sabina community held as prisoners of war by the Germans for 5 months. Sadly, not all of our veterans were able to return home. Eldon Lee is one known Sabina veteran who was killed in action while serving during World War II. Eldon, known to friends as Skinny, was inducted into the Army just out of high school. He was wounded when his tank was struck and succumbed to his wounds on the same day at the young age of 20. Eldon has a bio included in a book that features veterans buried or remembered in a Netherlands cemetery. This book is available at the Sabina Public Library. In 1942, as the U.S. geared up for wartime production, women applied for work in war plants. Many women of the Sabina area worked in defense plants in Dayton and Columbus. Still other women chose the military in which to make their contribution to the war effort. Several services to choose from included the Women's Army Corps, the U.S. Navy, or WAVES, the U.S. Marine Corps Women's Reserve, the U.S. Coast Guards, the Women's Air Force Service Pilots, or WASP, the Office of War Information and Office of Strategic Services, which was also the forerunner of the CIA, the Red Cross, and perhaps the two most critical services of all, the Army and Navy Nurse Corps. Around 2019, a group of volunteers worked to bring the Military Banners program to Sabina. Each spring, banners featuring photos of our local veterans are hung on poles lining the village streets. Several of these banners include World War II veterans. As our historical program for the evening concluded, slides showing additional military photos of World War II veterans from the Sabina community were displayed on the screen, and taps was played.